So there wasn't just one Easter egg here for fans of 12 Monkeys. Not even two, not even three, but a whole slew of Easter eggs and throwbacks and cast members and so on and so forth who were in 12 Monkeys, but also in Star Trek Picard season 3. Now, what does this have to do with anything? Now, some of you know this because you've been all over it over the past couple of weeks. It's been all over my feed, and I finally had to break down and make a video about it because I think it's brilliant. But Terry Matalas, who was the showrunner for seasons 2 and 3 of Star Trek Picard, was also the co-founder, co-creator, and showrunner for 12 Monkeys, which if you never watched 12 Monkeys, it was one of those brilliant sci-fi channel shows that got a pretty good run across multiple seasons and had a lot of fun doing it. And there's a lot of cast members from that show who showed up in Star Trek Picard, not the least of which was Shaw. You know, like his performance, Todd's performance is Shaw, but also, and I commented on this when he showed up in the episode when he was there as the Vulcan crime lord, Kryn, but Kirk Acavito, who I remembered mostly from Fringe, but he was also in 12 Monkeys, and also the fact that the Ferengi crime boss Sneed, who gets killed off super early in season 3, was actually played by Aaron Stanford, who is in complete makeup, so no one probably even recognized him, but he was the main character in the 12 Monkeys show. And again, if you've never watched the 12 Monkeys show, really, really good stuff. It's loosely the same as the film. It's based on the same ideas, but there's way more to it. And anyway, let's talk a little bit about Terry Matalas today because this, for me, it's all about the, when you find someone who's a really good writer and a really good showrunner and who's doing good things, it makes us want more. I'm a big fan, as an example, of Ronald D. Moore. I know that some people knew him from his time on Star Trek, especially working on Deep Space Nine and creating a lot of the Klingon stuff. But for me, what always resonated most, and it wasn't even until after the fact that I knew this, but Battlestar Galactica was like the show that made me really appreciate Ron D. Moore as a writer and showrunner. But I didn't even know at the time until after the fact that he was also the person behind Carnival on HBO, which ultimately, unfortunately, got canceled early on in its run. But it was a really good show that I really loved, and it was going really interesting places. It just didn't have a really big audience, and then he had sort of already gotten involved in Battlestar Galactica, so it was like, well, I'm off to the next thing. Now, not everything Ronald D. Moore has done has been brilliant. There was a really weird show that he did where like there was these scientists in Antarctica who find this like black liquid thing, and I don't remember. It was a really weird show that ran. He did like the first season, but then he was already getting involved with Outlander, and so he was off to that. And then the next season was ran by somebody else, and it ultimately bombed horribly and got canceled. I say all of this to talk more about Terry Matalas because he's had a pretty interesting career, as the mostly known these days for Picard seasons 2 and 3, but also the co-creator and showrunner of the 12 Monkeys series. But he was also brought on as a showrunner for MacGyver until it was canceled, and etc. So let's talk a little about him. He actually started working on Star Trek Voyager and Star Trek Enterprise back in the day as an associate, including writing stories for Enterprise. He then went on to work for Terra Nova on Fox and Nikita on the CW. And the reason Nikita on the CW is really interesting because that also featured characters from 12 Monkeys, most importantly, Aaron Sanford, who also played, was he the hacker? It was the redone version. If you've never watched the original, so there's the film La Femme Nikita, which is really cool, and then there was the La Femme Nikita show with, what is her name? Petra something, Petra Wilson or something, and then they did the redone version with I'm gonna blank on it now, with Nikita. I'm gonna go look it up real quick. What is her name? Maggie Q. But Aaron Stanford is there, and just it was a really good show. Anyway, so Matalas was a writer on those shows as well. Then they wrote the graphic novel Witch for Kickstart Comics, he and Fickett, and then wrote the Star Trek Next Generation comic miniseries Hive for IW1 Publishing. So if I'm not mistaken, him and Travis Fickett worked on the comic book together, but then went on and started work on the show 12 Monkeys. What's interesting about this is that it originally was written as a spec pilot script called Splinter that he and Figget wrote, and the script eventually ended up with Atlas Entertainment, who was the company that produced the 1995 film 12 Monkeys. They told the two that they wanted them. This I'm reading off the wiki, everybody, because this is a lot of people criticize the wiki. Get out of here. There's great information here. There's other sources, but this is a great sort of place to get your general information here. Get it out the door. Basically, they turned in a script. The company liked the script, wanted them to reboot do something around a reboot of the show. They wanted them to rewrite the pilot episode of this spec script that they had written, and they actually said, well, rather than rewrite the script, why don't we just change the characters' names to the characters from 12 Monkeys, and we're good to go. The company agreed, and they were off running. SyFy ordered the series, and it ran for 4 seasons. Now, from there, he did some other stuff, sold a drama to CBS, consulting producer on SyFy's Night Flyers, brought on the reboot of MacGyver as a showrunner for the 4th season, Last American Vampire on Quibi, um, and then of course being promoted to showrunner on Picard for the 2nd and 3rd seasons. Now, nobody knows what he's doing next, but I don't think it really matters because anything he touches recently is proving to be really, really good television, and I think most people are going to be following his career, if they weren't already, based on season 3 of Picard, which is, say what you will about season 1 and 2, seasons 2 and 3 were filmed back to back. So these are storylines that were already created in advance. So as much as people might like to say that, oh, season 3 was so amazing, and all of the writers who worked on seasons 1 and 2 should have been fired and all this other stuff, understand that everybody who worked on season 3 always also worked on season 2. It was filmed simultaneously. So you kind of don't know what you're talking about if you sit there and criticize season 2 is like so horrible and it was all these stupid people who don't know what they're doing, but praise the people who did season 3 because it's the same people. Hey everyone,
Anyway.
Renfail here with the commercial part of the video where I say, hey, if you like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss an update. And thanks to all of our supporters here on YouTube and over on Patreon, our highest members, our guild champions, Crazy's Relative, Remy D here on YouTube. And don't forget, if you want to support, it's really easy. You can do the memberships below, the Adventurers Guild, 3 different tiers. There's also the super thanks on any uploaded video or YouTube short that you find. There's also, of course, the super chats and stickers that you could do on any live stream or premiere, and the Patreon page if you want to dive into the fantasy world that I have with my brother and my wife, which is a tabletop game, a point-and-click adventure game, and a fantasy book series. All are great ways to keep this channel going and me going full-time. Thanks again for those of you who support. Let's get back to the video that you're watching now. Anyway, let's talk more about 12 Monkeys, because Terry Matalas is a really good showrunner, and he had a very limited runway with Star Trek Picard. Also with MacGyver, getting brought in to showrun a show that you didn't create and trying to take control of that, and that's not an easy solution, and it's very rare that that actually works. But it's good experience for the people who are working their way up the ladder, and I think this is the case with him. He's definitely showran some interesting stuff over the years. But 12 Monkeys, if you haven't watched this show, um, you should. You definitely should. Not only do we have some of the cast members that we talked about from Picard, Ann Stanford doing a cameo, Kirk Acavito doing a cameo, but Todd Stashwick having a major kind of role throughout the show is kind of psychotic. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. But the show is broadly, again, the film was good. That's always going to be one of those classic films that was early on in various actors' careers. But it's a film. It's a standalone thing from the mid '90s. That it's its own thing, and it's brilliantly done. But they took that here with the series and ran with it for 4 seasons, which is a hell of a lot of fun. So you've got Aaron Stanford and Amanda Schull starring as James Cole and Dr. Cassandra Riley, respectively. And it's all about the time travel, right, to stop the army of the 12 monkeys. Um, and this is sort of, I think for me, it's kind of like the epitome of SyFy, like the SyFy channel, because it was a show that was running during sort of the peak of them being willing to spend more money than they're willing to spend these days on things. And it wasn't a show that relied upon heavy special effects because it was mostly about being grounded in realistic sets. And yes, there was a time travel element and there was some, VFX associated with it, but it was mostly just about good storytelling around the time travel component and how to fix the past. Um, so they hell of a lot of fun, and we got a good run. You got 13 episodes in the first season, 13 episodes in the second season, 10 episodes in the third season, and 11 episodes in the fourth season, and it ran from 2015 to 2018. And just a ton of cast of characters here, many of whom, like we said, came over and worked on Picard with Terry Matalas. But I think it's a testament to good storytelling when you have someone who can navigate a sort of big franchise like Star Trek while also navigating lesser known IPs like 12 Monkeys. Because even though, yes, it was based off of the film, um, and based on the featurette, of course, but it's mostly a spec fic show that spun out of this idea and then became this bigger thing where they were allowed a lot more runway to run with the idea of time travel and the Army of the 12 Monkeys and everything else. And I think that's why you're able to have a cast of characters that can expand from the original role. And one of the things that I love about looking at a show that gets 4 or 5 seasons as opposed to only doing 2 seasons is that when you have a good showrunner on board, they have room to create a compelling story across multiple arcs. And of course, the main theme here in 12 Monkeys is the time travel element and stopping the army of the 12 Monkeys. But there's also some craziness, like the old, I gotta remember who plays the character. Oh, that's another guy from Noah Bean was also from Nikita. Um, Yeah, Tom Noonan as the tall man and the pallid man who's the villainous face of the Army of 12 Monkeys. His role here as this crazy psycho was just phenomenal. Um, and I think that this is one of those shows where if you haven't ever seen character actors doing their thing, this is why you need to watch a show like 12 Monkeys. If I'm not mistaken, this is the same guy who was in, was it Hell on Wheels? I'm going to go look real quick. Yep, he was on Hell on Wheels as Reverend Nathaniel Cole, who was this just troubled pastor who had a lot of issues. If you haven't ever watched Hell on Wheels, that's another great show that ran for what I think 4 or 5 seasons on AMC, if I'm not mistaken. Just solid acting, and I bring that up because Anson Mount, who played um, the main character in Hell on Wheels, Colin Bohannon, also ended up becoming Captain Pike in Star Trek Discovery, and then got his own show in Strange New Worlds, which is now coming back for the second season in June. And you bet your ass I'll be reviewing that show here on my channel. So it's kind of cool to see how all of these things can tie back in together. I mean, 6 degrees of separation between, I don't know, we'll have to find something to talk about, but um, character actors who can sink their teeth into a role. Um, I think a lot of times when you're only working with film, they want to stick with movie stars so that they can guarantee box office results, i.e., having Bruce Willis, in 12 Monkeys. Whereas with a television show, you can deal with lesser actors, and not that they're lesser actors. I need to maybe rephrase that so people don't think that I'm casting shade, because I'm not throwing shade. They're not movie stars. They're just great character actors who are really good at their job, but they focus on the they're working actors. They're making hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars a day, but they're not necessarily making millions of dollars, but they are providing us with hundreds of hours of solid entertainment. Because I'll give a good example here. Aaron Stanford, I haven't really seen him do a lot since 12 Monkeys, and he might not need to because after 4 seasons, they make a chunk of change, and maybe he's doing some stuff that he wants to do for now. But also, like Noah Bean, I haven't seen him do anything. Like I haven't seen him in anything since, and I know he's done some stuff. A series regular in a show called The End Game, a recurring role in something called The Invasion, multiple guest spots on other shows after the 12 Monkeys role. The point is, looking at these shows that provide actors with really good characters to sink their teeth into, and that is a result of great writers and great showrunners like Terry Matalas. So for me, I really loved 12 Monkeys. I thought it was a great show during its time. I loved Star Trek Picard, and yes, I loved all 3 seasons. Was season 3 the best? Absolutely, not even a question of anything. It was without a doubt the best season with huge levels of nostalgia by bringing the Last Generation cast back. The Next Generation, sorry. I said that during the final review. I called it the Next Generation. The episode's called The Last Generation, and here I just said The Last Generation when I meant The Next Generation. But bringing all those cast back helped to, make a really good show because those actors all have charisma. But you got to admit that character actors like Todd Stashwick as Captain Shaw knocked it out of the park. And that's in part because they worked for Terry back on other shows, and he said, you know what, these guys are really good at what they do. Let me bring them in and put them in these positions. And kudos to Paramount for trusting him enough to let him do that and have a little bit of sway over the casting and ultimately deliver something that is worth watching. So I'm keeping an eye on him. He's actually not that old either. Terry Matalas is a couple years older than I am. He's 47. So he's relatively, I don't want to say young, but he's, early to midway through his career. And, if he keeps producing really good television over the next 20 years, 30 years, I'm really looking forward to seeing what I'm going to get out of Mr. Matalas in the years to come. So, really good stuff. I think he's proven himself now in multiple shows as being a very capable writer and a very capable showrunner. I can't wait to see what's next. Till next time, everybody, stay safe. Happy viewing. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.